Why does India buy Russian oil? I see this topic insufficiently covered in this part of the world, either as India profiteering on war, takes one to know one, or clubbing India and China together in the reasoning for why they're buying Russian oil. The first mistake in this approach is assuming that India and China have the same objectives on anything. Let's go over a chain of events if India stops buying Russian oil. India is the second largest buyer of Russian crude, behind only China. So if India stops buying, China will then have buying power. It's called a monopsony, where they're the only large buyer and they can determine the prices they want. So they're going to push down the prices of Russian oil that they're buying. The Russians will have a choice to either give up in Ukraine or, if they want to keep the war machine chugging, to give the Chinese what they want, oil at lower prices. This does four things, none of which are good. One is straightforward. It's going to make China more economically and geopolitically powerful because they get cheaper oil. Two, it'll make oil more expensive for the EU and for India, and will probably cause oil inflation everywhere to some extent, which will make all of us poorer. Three, it'll give the Americans a near total seller's monopoly on oil to the rest of the world. You might say, but the Saudis sell oil and the Qataris sell their own energy. Well, the Saudis and the Qataris have American bases on their soil, they use the petrodollar, and so they're technically part of the American oil system as well. The remaining players have either been bombed by the US this year, Iran, or are going to be bombed by the US, Venezuela, which is surrounded by US warships right now. Four, and perhaps most importantly, it'll drive Russia deeper into the arms of China to finish what they started. Because if we're to believe the Russians, and I do, they consider this war a determination of whether they're still a great power or not. And if they lose this war, the answer to that question is no. And so they have to win. So it's likely to expect in the probabilistic scenario that they won't stop this war. So what you get is all four of these things are against Indian interests. Some of them are arguably against European interests, which is what the Indian External Affairs Minister Jaishankar has been telling the Europeans for some time. And even if despite this, India just takes the hit and stops buying, it probably still won't stop the war. So what we have to understand here is that China and India want very different things from this war. China perceives the Russians as a long-term geopolitical competitor. They are happy that both the Russians and the West are getting weaker while they get stronger. That's why it's the Indian position that the war should end as soon as possible. Russia can go back to being a hedge against both the West and China, and so that Russia and India don't have to be forced to take sides anymore. Zelensky also understands this, and that is why India and Ukraine have a good relationship, where China does not. But if the war has to go on, India doesn't want all those four bad things to happen, and in its view, the West shouldn't either.